Okay. Yes, okay. So I'm going to be talking about the DPhil program here at the Department of Computer Science at Oxford. Um, yeah, my name's Jonathan Barrett, and I'm the Director of Graduate Studies here, which means I have a sort of overall view of the DPhil program in particular. Welcome, everyone, to the virtual graduate open day. Nice to see everybody. I mean, I can't see anybody, of course, but nice to virtually see everybody. Um, let's start with some absolute basics. First of all, DPhil is short for Doctor of Philosophy, and this is just some fancy Oxford terminology that I don't know Oxford has because it has to be different from everywhere else or whatever, but it means exactly the same thing as a PhD. Normally, it takes 3 to 4 years to complete, and the idea of a DPhil or a PhD, the thing that you have to do to get one is to present a thesis that makes a substantial original contribution in computer science. And the way this is examined is that after submitting a thesis, someone has a final viva examination. That means an oral examination with two examiners, one from inside the university, one from outside, perhaps another university somewhere else, and they will discuss the thesis, the findings in detail. Okay, this isn't a long presentation, but I'm just going to talk. I mean, it's aimed at anyone who is thinking of applying to do a DPhil in the Department of Computer Science here, and who might therefore be putting together an application over the course of the next months. So I'm going to say a bit just about I don't know, what you should be thinking about, the general idea of doing a DPhil or a PhD for that matter, who it's for, and then a few details about the actual application process that we have here. So first of all, why a DPhil? Um, Certainly, some people will go on to a career in academia. That is, they'll spend their career doing research in universities, also doing teaching, maybe helping with admin, the standard career of an academic. And for most of those careers, it's essential to have a PhD to start with. A lot of our DPhils also go on to careers in industry, um, where they might be doing research in the same way that someone in academia would be doing. They might be part of a research team, either in a small startup or a large company like Google or IBM or someone. They might be, doing hands-on research themselves, or they might be in more of a management role or whatever. And certainly, depending on the kind of position that you want, it can be that having a PhD is either essential or is an advantage of some kind there. Having said that, a DPhil takes 3 to 4 years of your life, and the reason for doing it can't just be that you want to say that you've got this particular qualification on your CV. I mean, that might make sense for doing something that takes a month or two, but not 3 to 4 years out of your life. So it's essential that you really do have a passion for computer science in general, and in particular for your chosen subject area, the particular subfield in computer science that you want to study. Otherwise, you're going to end up hating it, well before 3 to 4 years is up. It can be thrilling, of course, doing this. The whole point of a PhD is making that original contribution. That means you're discovering new things that no human has ever discovered before, and that is a thrilling thing. But, during the course of doing this, there can be long periods where you don't discover much. It can seem solitary sometimes. So you have to have that passion to really want to do it. And so really the best sort of immediate reason or essential reason for why do a DPhil is just that it's really, really what you want to be doing for the next 3 to 4 years. All right, I'll say some words now about the particular application process that we have here at Computer Science in Oxford. The first thing to do, I think, is to think about what research topic you actually want to work on. You have to have a particular research area in mind, a particular topic, something more specific than just computer science in general. And with a topic in mind, you should consider potential supervisors. You should do this before applying, because you have to name one or two on the application when you do apply. So have a good look at the departmental website, for instance, have a look at the pages of individual faculty members where it tells you what kind of research they do. Yeah, and aim to identify one or two supervisors who are working on things that you're interested in, who you would be interested in being supervised by. There is nothing wrong at all with contacting potential supervisors in advance before you put in an application. Just introduce yourself a little bit. Yeah, say that you're interested. Say what you're interested in, and perhaps ask what sorts of projects they might have available, or what sort of thing they might supervise. That's fine. It's not compulsory. A lot of people just sending an application without contacting a supervisor in advance, and that's absolutely fine too. When you do apply online, you'll have to include certain things, a CV, transcripts of the grades that you've obtained in your education so far from your previous institutions. You have to submit a research proposal. I'll say a few words about that in a minute, and 3 references from people who know you and know your work. Let me say a quick word about, as I said, you also have to name either 1 or 2 potential supervisors. If you name more than 2, it won't go to all of them, because it's just slightly unfair to other candidates to have an application be looked at by loads and loads of different people here. So that's why it's either 1 or 2. If you don't put any, then someone from admin will be in touch to ask, can you please suggest a supervisor or 2? And it will be then them who first look at the application. You can put either 1 or 2. It's fine either way. Okay, now after you've made this online application, you may be shortlisted. And if you're shortlisted, that will mean that you're invited to an interview. Most of the interviews are online. There'll be at least 2 faculty members, sometimes more, conducting the interview. I'll say a few more words about interview in a minute. And then after that, if your application is successful, you'll get an offer which you will either accept or reject. Actually, there's 2 things. There's the offer of a place, and then there's the offer of funding. Of course, a lot of people applying will need funding, so they'll need to get an offer both of a place and also of funding. A few more words about funding too in a minute. We do have admissions criteria, so do make sure that you satisfy these before making an application. For people with UK qualifications, it's like this. You need to have an undergrad degree in a relevant subject, that is a 4-year degree with at least a strong 2-1, or you can have a 3-year undergrad degree followed by a master's in a relevant subject, which either has merit or distinction. For people who are applying, whose undergrad qualifications are from institutions in other countries, um, what we say is that they should have grades that are equivalent to those UK things. So, for example, from the US, that means something like a 4-year degree with a GPA of 3.5 or higher. If you're wondering about grades for, from your own country, there is quite a helpful bit on the Oxford and also the Cambridge websites where you can look up different countries and see, what sorts of grades would be judged equivalent to a UK 2-1 or higher, so you can check that. Okay. I said I'd say a few words about the different aspects of the application. So one of those is a research proposal. A normal length for this would be about 2 pages. It's a little bit difficult for me to give very specific advice because I think it depends a bit on the subject area. Research proposals in different areas tend to look slightly different. It is something that you can ask your proposed supervisor about if you want to. Although they're not going to write it for you, they may say, well, I think you prefer you if you write it yourself because it's one of the things that I want to see. What would you write if you were doing it yourself? But you can ask about it. I'll try and give, um, some very broad brush sort of overview advice that ought to apply to anyone who's writing one of these. I think it's always well worth conveying a sense of why do you want to do a DPhil yeah, and in particular why at Oxford and why at this department in particular and why with that supervisor or two in particular, why do you want to join that group? You can talk about relevant skills and experience, certainly. It's probably not the place to write a very long account of a project that you've already done, like an undergrad dissertation. By all means, mention one, but this is supposed to be a proposal, after all, of the research you're going to do, not a long description of something you've already done. Certainly outline a research topic, describe the general area that you're interested in, try and show some knowledge of that. Citing papers is always useful if there are some that you've read. I always feel that citing papers which are by the group you're actually applying to somehow looks good. That's a good way of showing interest. And then moving on from the general area of research, think perhaps in a little more detail about what your own project would ideally involve. So say some words perhaps about what you're trying to do here. Explain without using jargon. It should be readable by not just someone in that exact area, but general computer scientists. So sort of long pages of mathematical derivations is normally too much detail here. And then perhaps say, why is this interesting? Why is it difficult? Difficult enough that it warrants a PhD. What is your approach going to be if you can? What is new in this approach? What difference will it make if you're successful? I do appreciate that in some areas it may be difficult to go into as much detail as I seem to be suggesting there, and you may put more emphasis on describing the general area. So it slightly depends what you're applying for there. Okay, as I also said, after you've submitted an application, you may be shortlisted. That means an interview. So what happens at interviews? It'll take about 20 or 30 minutes, normally online. Like I said, it is up to the individual interviewers to ask what questions they want to. So there's no sort of general template where I can just tell you exactly what's going to be asked and then you revise that thing. I mean, certainly they're going to be interested in what is your existing knowledge. Very often they'll be interested in discussing previous projects you have undertaken, like if you did an undergrad or an MSc dissertation, they may talk to you about that. This is the time where you might go into a bit more detail about that. And even if it was a year or two ago, make sure you kind of remember it well, because they might well ask, some follow-up questions, perhaps some details about it to see how well you understood it. There may be some technical questions in the relevant field. So, for instance, if you've said that you've read a particular paper or two, they may well pick up on that and ask a technical question or two that's relevant um, to the work in that paper. Um, so yeah, don't be tempted to say you've read all kinds of things when actually you just skimmed the abstract. It may backfire if they start asking you about it. And certainly they'll want to discuss your research interests, possible research directions, but possible projects that you might work on. Taking as a springboard for this discussion the research proposal that you wrote and presented in your application. Right. That's so much about interviews. Just a bit of information now. We have a couple of deadlines for DPhil applications. One of those is the 2nd of December, midday. And that deadline is important for most applicants because that is the deadline you have to apply by if you want to be considered for funding. There is then a later deadline, which is the 3rd of March next year at noon. And if you apply by that deadline, you won't be considered for funding, but it's appropriate for those who already have their own source of funding, perhaps an external scholarship or something like that. Those people can apply by the 3rd of March in order to be considered for a place. And we do actually still consider applications after the 3rd of March, depending on if places are still available. So it's not quite guaranteed after that date that places are available and that applications will be considered. So how about funding then? What does it mean to be considered for funding? Well, there's quite a wide variety in Oxford of different sources of funding. There's never as much to give out as we'd like. We always have, way more applications who we'd really like to give funding to than we actually have funded places to give. So it is pretty competitive getting a funded offer. Some sources of funding that we do have to give out include scholarships from the EPSRC, the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. The department gets a quota of those to give out. Clarendon scholarships are university ones. The department also gets a quota of 3 or 4 of those to give out. There is sometimes departmental funding, like in recent years we've had a departmental Women in Computer Science scholarship. There is sometimes industrial funding sponsored by some particular company or other that's been awarded to the department. It can also happen that ad hoc studentships with attached funding are advertised throughout the year. There's a web page on the departmental website where those studentships get advertised, and they'll have their own sort of deadline, which is a bit separate from the main routine with those December and March deadlines I was just talking about. So it can be worth keeping an eye on that page. And there's further funding that gets allocated by the University of Oxford and the colleges of Oxford. Now, in case all this sounds very complicated, the good news is most of that complexity is for us to bother with. And as an applicant, all you need to do is apply by the December deadline, and you will automatically be considered for all of the possible sources of funding that you are eligible for. So you don't need to do anything special to be considered for all these different sources. You just apply by that December deadline and you will be. The only exception to what I've just said is that there can be a very small number of university scholarships that you kind of have to apply for separately. Normally they have quite strong eligibility criteria, those ones, but you can check the university web pages to see if there's any of those. Okay, that's pretty much it from me. There are some further sources of information here. So yeah, as I said, for research topics and potential supervisors, please do have a look at the departmental web pages, look at faculty members' pages, what they say that they do. For details on the application process and scholarships and things, see the departmental web pages, couple of links there, and also the main university web pages, couple of links there. And for general questions, feel free to contact the graduate admissions team here at that particular email address. I'll skip on because I probably the slides will be available to people later if in case they want to get those links. And yeah, our final bit of information there. And that's it from me. Thank you.